Most people believe Rome fell in 476 CE. It didn't. The Roman Empire kept issuing laws, crowning emperors, and calling itself Rome for almost another 1,000 years. And then it took a Muslim conqueror putting on the title, Caesar, to finally settle who Rome actually belonged to. You've heard the fall of Rome. What you probably haven't heard is where Rome went. Afterward, in 330 CE, the Emperor Constantine dedicated a new capital on the shores of the Bosphorus, a city he called New Rome, later known as Constantinople. When the western half of the empire finally collapsed in 476, that eastern capital didn't skip a beat. Its people never called themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romans, Romaioi, for nearly 1,000 years after Rome supposedly ended. Here's the detail almost nobody sits with. The fall of Rome in 476 CE only ever described half an empire. That year, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed a teenage Western emperor named Romulus Augustulus and didn't even bother installing a replacement. Historians love that date because it's clean and dramatic. But the eastern half of the same empire, ruled from Constantinople, wasn't touched. Its emperor kept minting coins, kept commanding armies, and kept calling himself the Roman Emperor. Because as far as he and everyone under him was concerned, he still was one. But rather than just survive, this eastern half was about to try something nobody expected, taking the old empire back. In 527 CE, an emperor named Justinian took the throne in Constantinople with one obsession: restoring Rome to what it used to be. He commissioned a total rewrite of Roman law, a project called the Corpus Juris Civilis, finished around 534 CE, a legal code so thorough it still shapes court systems across Europe today. Then he sent his general Belisarius west with an army small enough to sound reckless. In 533, Belisarius crushed the Vandal kingdom in North Africa. 2 years later, he opened a brutal war in Italy against the Ostrogoths, a war that dragged on until Ravenna finally fell in 540. For a moment, Rome, the actual city, the actual peninsula, was Roman again, under an emperor ruling from a city Julius Caesar never even saw. Justinian wasn't just fighting wars. He was rebuilding the empire's skyline to match its ambitions. After riots burned down Constantinople's cathedral in 532, he had it rebuilt on a scale nobody in the ancient world had attempted. The Hagia Sophia finished in 537, its dome seeming to float on light pouring through ringed windows. When it was finished, Justinian reportedly said, "Solomon, I have outdone thee." This wasn't a monument to a fading empire. It was a monument built by people who believed Rome was just getting started. Again, and yet the empire that built it would spend the next 9 centuries slowly being forgotten by the very people who named it. This is where the story gets strange. For roughly the next 900 years, the empire ruled from Constantinople never called itself anything but Roman. Its people spoke increasingly in Greek, not Latin. Its culture, art, and religion evolved into something distinct from ancient Rome. But the identity never changed. Even as the empire shrank, lost territory to Arab conquests, and fractured under civil wars, its citizens on the eve of their final catastrophe were still calling themselves Romans. The word Byzantine wasn't even invented yet. A German historian named Hieronymus Wolff coined it in 1557, more than a century after the empire was gone, just to give historians a tidier label than the empire that wouldn't stop calling itself Rome, which means the empire. Everyone else remembers as Byzantine never actually existed under that name while it was alive. It just called itself what it had always called itself, and that stubborn identity was about to face its final test. In April 1453, an Ottoman sultan named Mehmed II laid siege to Constantinople with a force of roughly 80,000 men. Defending the 1,000-year-old walls was the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, with barely 7,000 soldiers, outnumbered more than 10 to 1. On the night of May 28th, Constantine gave what history remembers as the funeral oration of the Roman Empire, telling his men he would fight beside them until the end. The next day, the walls broke. According to the accounts that survive, Constantine tore off the imperial regalia that marked him as emperor, so he'd die as just another soldier and vanished into the fighting. No one ever found his body. No grave was ever identified. In the centuries after, legend grew that he hadn't really died at all, that he'd been turned to marble by an angel and hidden in a cave beneath the city, waiting to wake up and take Constantinople back. Here's the detail that should really unsettle you. Mehmed II, the Sultan who had just ended the Roman Empire's 1,000-year run, didn't walk away from the Roman title. He adopted it. Almost immediately after taking the city, Mehmed began styling himself Caesari Rum, Caesar of Rome, arguing that since Constantinople had been the seat of the Roman Empire since Constantine founded it in 330, whoever held the city now held the title that came with it. The Patriarch of Constantinople, the empire's own highest religious authority, even recognized the claim. Most European kings refused to, so the empire didn't just vanish in 1453. Its title got fought over by the very man who conquered it. So when did Rome actually fall? In 476, when a teenage emperor in the West was quietly deposed and nobody even replaced him. In 1453, when the last emperor, calling himself Roman, disappeared into the smoke of a breached wall, his body never found. Or did it never really fall at all? Did it just keep getting claimed, generation after generation, by whoever held the city, right up until a sultan decided he was Caesar too? Nobody has ever agreed on an answer. If you had to pick the real end of Rome, 476, 1453, or somewhere in between, say which one and why in the comments. And if this is the first time you've heard that Rome quietly lasted another 1,000 years under everyone's nose, subscribe, because that's exactly the kind of history this channel was built to dig back up.